How's it going? This is Josh with Edge Knife Works. I'm going to do a product review on some abrasive belts for knife makers. These are the new blue ceramic belts that VSM is making. They are a 36 grit belt. You can see with these two belts, the one on the right is a new belt, and this one here on the left is a slightly worn belt that I've been using and testing in the shop. You can still see that the belt on the left still has quite a bit of grit and grain to it. It still feels like it has a good bite. This belt has ground over 155 linear inches of hardened material for grinding bevels into knives. It grounds about 7 to 8 inch chef knives, a handful of small 4.5 inch utility knives, a bunch of other random miscellaneous knives. And I tested this up against a couple other abrasive belts, both by VSM and by other abrasive manufacturers. And these new belts came out to being the best performing belts out of all the ones that I've tested. So real quick, we'll run through what belts we tested in comparison with these and how well these worked. We used some unbranded VSM belts, the VSM 870s, the VSM 885s, and then we used some 3M 967 belts as another manufacturer to see how they performed. And like I said, these came out on top as far as performance went. They lasted the longest. They lasted far longer than any of the other belts. Most of the other belts that we tested only got between 30 to 50 linear inches of material of post heat treat grinding. And what I'm using as a gauge for that is when the belt stops working the way it should. When it starts building up too much heat or didn't feel like it was cutting quite right, I would say that's it, and it'd go off to a profiling rack like this one. This is still being used for grinding pre-heat treat or profiling blades, where some of the other belts that we tested, like the unbranded VSMs, once they were done with the bevel grinding, and same thing with the 870s, once they felt like they were done grinding bevels, they were also done for profiling. They didn't have hardly any life left in them. And these are the opposite. They lasted at least 3 times longer than any of the other belts that we tried. And this one that has done the most of the work in the shop is still grinding and still working. They do only come in a 36 grit, but I've heard that they're going to have them in 50 and 60 grit in the future. That's about as high as they're going to go. The way that the grain is engineered on these belts, they really can't get them much finer than that. But they're really, really good belts. I'd highly recommend them for anybody that's grinding bevels after you're done heat treating, or even before. Like I said, this belt I'm still using for pre-heat treat grinds. I could probably get another 40 or 50 knives pre-heat treat off of this belt, to push it to the point where it was just completely done. I think that these are perfect for most knife makers, where that low to medium pressure to get the grain to fracture and self-sharpen is really beneficial. We tried the 967s by 3M, and those actually had very poor performance for the way that I grind in the shop. They ended up only getting, I think, 30 or 40 linear inches of material, so they ended up being quite expensive for when you actually break it down per inch of material ground. These ended up being right around 10 cents per inch for actual cost in use. They are about $18 a piece for the belts. So they seem expensive up front, but they're really not. I'd recommend getting a couple of them to try them out, and I'm sure you'll be ordering more of them, just like I'm going to be ordering more of them. For how much you get out of one of these belts, they're the cheapest 36 grit belt that I have tried. They cut really cool, which is really good if you're grinding after the blade has been hardened. You don't want to build up any excess heat, and the abrasive breaks down very easily. So I'd really recommend these. Give them a try. You can find them at Pop's Knife Supply. They've got a bunch of new products on their site, and this is one of them. So again, you can see even after all the use on this belt, it still looks almost new, and I can keep using this for quite a while. You know, I hate throwing away belts, so if I can use a belt that lasts longer versus using a lot of belts that only last for a couple of blades, I would much rather use something like this that I'm gonna get, you know, 15 to 20 knives out of before it gets to the point where it's not quite cutting the way I want it for hardened material. And once again, when you get to that point, these still have enough life in them to grind your profiles in, or grind preheat treat bevels and things like that. So again, I'd highly recommend them. I really liked them in the shop. They worked really well, and I'm planning on using these from now on for all of my 36 grit belts, and excited to see when they get these in the 50 or 60 grits as well. So thank you. Check them out and try one or two for yourself. Have a good one.